Welcome to today's GC Advantage webinar. Today's topic is on everybody's mind. Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, and specifically, we're talking about some tips for balancing risk and reward. My name is Bob Barker, and thanks for joining us today. For those who may not be familiar with our firm, we specialize in helping companies develop and build their in-house legal teams as well as their compliance teams. So we recruit general counsel as well as any lawyer that reports into the general counsel or chief legal officer, as well as chief compliance officers. And we also have a team of distinguished general counsel and chief compliance officers who provide executive coaching and advising for those in those functions to help develop them and help them be successful in their role. As far as the GC Advantage program, it's our personal development program to help both legal and compliance leaders advance. And we bring in different speakers to help on the different topics. Today we have a chief compliance officer and a general counsel that's also working with Marla Persky, who's our strategic advisor and executive coach. And today's presentation will be recorded. We will be making the recording available, so everybody who is signed up for this will get a notification when that recording is available. We also today are going to have some polling questions, and I'll ask those to be launched now. And then during the webinar, we'll also have, if you have any questions, please submit them in the Zoom app. There should be a little icon as far as for submitting questions, and you can see if anybody else has already submitted the question or something similar. And if that's the case, you could just give it a thumbs up so that it would rise to the top, so that the presenters today will know that that is a very important topic for us. With that, I will turn it over to Marla, and then I'll come back on at the end.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Bob.
Marla.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So glad that you were able to join us. I am Marla Persky. Before I happily retired from the practice of law, I was general counsel in the pharmaceutical industry of two of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. And since my retirement, I've been working with BarkerGilmore as an executive coach, and I sit on corporate boards. That's actually how I know our panelists today, because I work with them in those capacities. I'd like to turn it to Brian. Brian, please introduce yourself to our audience. And in addition to saying who you are and what you do, maybe you could just really briefly mention why AI is a topic that is of interest to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Marla. Brian Connor here. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer at Xeris Pharmaceuticals. We're a specialty pharmaceutical company based in Chicago. Disclaimer here, I am not a lawyer. I hang out with a lot of lawyers, but, I've been, many roles in the pharmaceutical industry, but the last 20 years dedicated to corporate compliance and risk management. And with that, any kind of new tool or technology that comes into the life sciences, it needs to be looked at. And, artificial intelligence is on everybody's mind right now. And how do we use it? We want to take it from one side of, I always say, how do we be in the middle? I don't want to be the cowboy all the way to the right. I don't want to be, the lagger left behind, but how can we be part of the party to make sure the business moves forward and do it, but do it in the right way? And because my major job is to protect the company, but also to help the company grow. And I think this is what this webinar is all about, is how do we manage that risk and benefit and to treat our internal, external clients in the best way we can.
Thanks, Brian. Tim, why don't you introduce yourself and also share with the audience why AI is of interest to you?
Great. Thanks, Marla. And good morning, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Tim Fraser. I'm Chief Legal Officer for Toshiba America. And, you know, similar to Brian, I think I've really come to believe in the opportunity that generative AI in particular presents in terms of the ability for us to increase value creation, to create that value at the speed of business, and to, quite frankly, reduce costs in the process of doing that. And that's really from a sort of a legal department perspective, but also recognizing that the same is true at the company level. And so I've really become very focused on trying to understand how to really realize that opportunity, to do it in a way that manages the risks at an appropriate level for the company, and also to be a champion for it in the business overall, and help making sure that the business is really embracing the opportunity to transform and to become a leader in our industry.
Thanks, Tim. Maybe we can go to the next slide, which is an overview of what we're going to talk about today. So should come as no surprise to our audience that Brian, Tim, and I all believe that artificial intelligence, AI, is a very powerful tool that is not going away. It's going to continue to drive business and should also be viewed as an opportunity to help us work faster, smarter, and perhaps less expensively in our roles, both in compliance and legal departments. This is a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to have just a couple of slides, which I'm viewing as level setting slides, so that we all understand what we mean when we talk about artificial intelligence. We get some of the lingo down. We talk about generative AI and how to use AI as a tool from a very practical perspective, both in the legal departments and the compliance departments. And of course, because we are legal and compliance, we need to talk about the risks associated with AI and how to mitigate the risks. So going to the next slide, Brian, why don't you we talk about artificial intelligence. It is not a monolith. It's many different things. Maybe you can help us get grounded on the various types of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, when we started talking about this a couple of months ago, one of the things I thought about right away was the Terminator, and watching that movie as a young child in the 80s and seeing where we're going to, and it kind of freaked me out. But going through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, we've had many different kind of technologies that have brought forth, especially with the World Wide Web and everything like that. And there's tools that we use every day, from reactive machines that we see all the time in automation and in manufacturing. We have limited memory, kind of like how all our cars work now. It tells you not to switch lanes and stuff like that. But that's short-term memory. It's not keeping data to help you drive better. But it's AI that most of us use every day. We're seeing I see almost every quarter advances in theory of mind with social robots. You're seeing it all these trade shows, electronics, and now we're seeing the launch of Apple AI and what's that going to do and things like that. So it's progressing. And then when you look at people, about the fear of things, you're getting into, I was like taking over, human bodies and what is real and what is not real, going from the Star Trek self-aware example here to the Terminator example, where you have fully automated, autonomous, beings out there to be able to react and act like a human. So it's kind of like the landscape we're going. It's stuff that we use every day. I sometimes I don't even realize I'm using AI. I'm like, oh, I've been using that for years. And to where we are. So this, like Marla said, like we're trying to get familiar terminology here, but also I always want to say this stuff is changing fast and there's always something new going on. So if we did this 6 months from now, I think this slide would even look different.
And Tim, if we let's talk about some of the lingo. We're going to try very hard not to use too many acronyms while we're talking about this, but in case we do, let's go over some of the acronyms, please.
Sure. So just picking up where Brian left off, uh, you know, AI is not new. This is something that's been around for a long time. It is something that has been commonplace in our day-to-day lives. Machine learning is one form of AI that is the ability for a computer to learn using a complex algorithm, and where it's going to basically look at the data, run it through the algorithm, test to see whether it's correct, or receive input as to whether it is correct or not, and use that input to basically improve the algorithm, and over time gets smarter and smarter. Recommendations, right, that we receive in Netflix, that's this sort of machine learning. It's learning from us, it's learning from everybody else who's using Netflix. Another example is medical diagnoses. So there are lots of opportunities and where they're using machine learning. So you take an X-ray, and the radiologist may get a provisional diagnosis based on an AI review of the scan. The radiologist will look at it, make a decision as to whether they agree or disagree, and then basically if they disagree, or regardless of what the outcome is, it'll take that to help reinforce the learning, but it helps to speed up and actually improve the overall accuracy of the process. Natural language processing, this is really the interface between the computer and our basically human language. It's about understanding what we say, interpreting it, and then being able to create language. This is, virtual assistants and chatbots are commonplace examples that we are dealing with, or that we are living with every day. And then we get to large language models. This is generative AI, OpenAI, ChatGPT, Gemini, take your pick. And this is really the breakthrough that we've really been living with for the last 2 years. This is what they did is sort of machine learning of sorts combined with natural language processing. It's basically taken the entire contents of the internet and more, and basically trained a incredibly complex algorithm. It has 175 billion variables to create an algorithm. And what we always have to keep in mind whenever we're using a LLM based solution is it does not understand what it is doing. It is simply a predictive engine that is basically using probabilities based on that algorithm to predict what the next word should be. Happens to be really good at it, to the point where you think that it actually is basically thinking, but we always need to keep in mind that it is not. It is actually a predictive engine. So that just gives a quick overview of sort of what we're talking about from a technology and lingo perspective.
So Tim, when there's autocorrect, is autocorrect a form of LLM?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. So the rise of generative AI. Brian took us through the different types of AI a moment ago, from the earlier uses, which really dealt with big data to generate reports on how things on things based upon past experience and existing data. However, generative AI is now being used to create things that don't currently exist and manipulate existing information. And that's what most of us are talking about today. Brian, can you take us through the slide so that we focus a little bit more on generative AI?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to my previous slide too. It's the exciting time, right? I mean, it's unleashing boundless creativity and business applications as we're seeing with generative AI. but it's also, scary too, because it's happening so fast. And you're seeing a really big reliance on it now, and how we do business, starting from, I have kids that just graduated college, and how they, relied on AI to do their work, unlike how we had to train ourselves. And you look at the pie chart to the left, it is about writing assistance, personal research, and doing all the, I guess, the basic stuff, the blocking and tackling, so to speak, to do it. And like I said, as we get into probably 6 months from now next year, this pie chart's going to change. I think you're going to see business dynamics, change. Web publishing we see it all the time. The creativity and the arts and entertainment, be able to create whole new stories that pays upon bringing that stuff in from previous knowledge, to stock portfolio management, right? Using these algorithms, to help you predict the stock market and help you, wisely invest your money and things like that, taking away hours of analyst work and putting into here. And as you see with everything else to the right, you have, different versions, right? Just like anything else that you buy now, is you had the free version, which is limited. You have the paid version, which comes more complex and more tools and more power to that engine. And as we get into, like I mentioned before, the Apple AI, that's coming, in the competitive landscape alone in the AI field is even going to make the technology expound even farther.
So would you agree that most legal and compliance departments which use AI are using the more traditional type of AI, but in future, legal and compliance will be using more generative?
I'm seeing more generative, especially I look at it from a resource standpoint. I'll be selfish here and just talk about compliance. I mean, compliance historically, we're traditionally sometimes resource constraint. So where we can have automation, it really helps a lot, because I won't have the manpower to do it. And one of the things to do is policy writing, right? I don't have to put in specific company data to write a policy on, write a code of conduct, or to write a policy on conflicts of interest. There's also tools that I use to look at third party due diligence, things like that. And I've been using AI, the previous tools, email searches, investigations and things like that. But I'm seeing, looking at opportunities now at how I can be more effective and efficient in running a department, as resources wane and over time. So for me, it's exciting, but it's also, the right tool at the right time. And also, just because you have the tool doesn't mean you can just go there and leave it there. You have to make sure you understand it. You got to make sure you have people that can manage it, and to govern it.
So we actually have the results of the survey. And the first question was, is your company using AI as a business tool? 78% of us are, and 22% are not. The next question is, your legal compliance department using AI as a tool? This is closer to 50-50, 46% yes, 54% no. And I think that's going to get, this question is going to be one of the things that we address as we go forward in our conversation today, because my prediction, my crystal ball is saying that at some point, the use of AI will become de rigueur, and every department is going to be doing it, and it will be a huge misstep, and if not malpractice, if you don't. And then the final question is, have you used AI in your personal life? 79% yes, 29% no. And I would, again, venture a guess that 21% that said no don't really are using AI, and they don't recognize the AI they're using. So let's go to the next slide, because there have been surveys done. In fact, Lowenstein Sandler did a survey along with the ACC of New Jersey, to talk about, to question a large swath audience about the benefits and risks of AI in legal workflows. And 165 in-house legal professionals were surveyed. 64% said they hadn't used generative AI for legal tasks. 43% expressed either no confidence or only slight confidence in their understanding of AI, which could explain why people are reluctant to use it if you don't understand it. Only 25% of the respondents said that they received any training related to AI, and more than half said they don't have any plans to get trained on AI. Respondents that have already integrated generative AI into their legal department workflows said they were doing so primarily for general research, for document generation, and for summarization tasks. And let's not forget that the ABA has now issued a formal opinion around the use of AI by attorneys covering level of competence, duty of confidentiality, and by disclosing the use of AI according to what is Formal Opinion 512. So, Tim, have you done a risk assessment around the use of AI in your company in Toshiba?
Yes, we have. As we're in the process of standing up a AI governance program, and in the lead up to that, we spent some time looking at what are the risks that we have, so that we can make sure that our activities, risk mitigation activities, are tailored to those. And look,
Let's take this down so I can see your faces in large as opposed to small. Great.
Yeah. So look, we are primarily at this point a B2B industrial and energy companies. And so when we're using AI as a business, it is primarily to help augment employees' activities so that they're more efficient and effective in their jobs. Which means that, we're largely consumers of, tools and resources, third-party tools and resources. We are doing some sort of creating some custom solutions, but we are not an AI first company, and AI is not core to our business model. So we have a different set of risks there. But for us, it's really around the primary risks are going to be around inadvertent disclosure of confidential information. And, that's probably our number one risk, quite frankly. I think as we start to, the idea of everyone's aware of the risk of basically putting confidential information into a public solution and having that get swept up in the learning. I think one of the areas that is going to become a much bigger issue as we start to really adopt and leverage these technologies is understanding what data within the company. So if you have basically private solutions or public, quasi-public solutions that will protect confidentiality, understanding what data within the company it's going to have access to and who will get access to it within the company. So think about, for example, Copilot, right? Now Copilot is configured to limit access according to your Active Directory security restrictions. But you've got to think about what is that going to get access to, because as a tool, it is going to be integrated eventually into sort of all parts of our Microsoft ecosystem. And you don't want somebody, for example, to be able to gain access to confidential information from HR, just as an example. I think these are issues that, quite frankly, are going to be manageable, but I think that you're going to have some probably well-publicized missteps as we start to really integrate these technologies into our day-to-day activities.
And who's leading the charge at your company on the use of AI? Is it you in the legal department? Is it the business?
So back, a year and a half ago, it was me. And that was just because I really saw the opportunity, if not imperative for us as a company to really embrace it and really sort of championed it within the company, worked collaboratively with on a cross-functional basis with other executive leaders across the organization to conceive, develop, and implement an AI innovation program, which has the purpose of trying to cultivate a culture of experimentation and responsible adoption, which we've since turned over. We now work collaboratively with IT, compliance, and the business on governance going forward. But at this point, it's something that is becoming more of an IT and business centric driven process. But that has evolved over the last year and a half.
So a question from our audience is, what are your thoughts on members of your company using AI like ChatGPT, Notebook LM, et cetera, in their work, including uploading confidential documents and information? How do you manage this, including balancing the power of those tools, especially the efficiency with data analysis and the risk of disclosing confidential information?
So the governance policies that we're developing and implementing, essentially the rule is if it's not an approved tool, you should not be inputting confidential information into it. If you want to basically, if you have a personal subscription to ChatGPT and you want to use it to create a policy, not inputting any confidential information, not a problem. But confidential information cannot go into unapproved AI solutions, and that at some level restrains our employees' ability to really leverage the technology. But what it also means is that we as a business need to meet that challenge and opportunity to identify, develop, and implement solutions that will, basically allow us to operate more efficiently and effectively.
So Brian, a question came in about what's the realistic risk of disclosing confidential information using large language models? While it's technically a disclosure, isn't AI using it for algorithmic modeling? And so what's the true risk of disclosure? Is it more blown up than the risk truly is?
It's depends on your risk tolerance. We take the approach that no confidential information can go there because once it's out, it's out. You can't retract it. And I think Tim brought up some great points there about how they're dealing with it. Yes, to write a policy and stuff like this, and there's going to be missteps along the way. We're going to learn from those. But right now, taking that approach of putting some, we call them stop gates in our policy. We have stop gates. We have between IT, compliance, and legal. So anybody can come to the committee and say, I need something, I want to use this solution to do that. And we look at it and we approve it based upon, can they do it? And then we give the restrictions. One, we don't even let them use personal email. Xeris email. We set up different email accounts for them because we're not sure, like I said, about what is the trustworthy information out there, and to be careful with this. And right now we had the benefit of being a smaller company. So from a 400 person company, I know about 390 of them by first name, so I can go out, knock on the door and do that. Tim is up to a bigger challenge there with a big multinational company and stuff like that, and herding those cats, so to speak. So and being a pharmaceutical company, we have IP. We have to, everybody, IP, personal data, customer data, patient data. So it goes into our cyber risk as well, our cybersecurity risk. And how does those play in each other? And those are the stuff that keeps you up at night. It's the breaches and the confidentiality. So right now we take a strict thing. It's like we don't put any company information. So if somebody wants to write, for example, HR wants to write a job description, right? We allow that, but don't put Xeris, don't put any company information. Then you take it, you save it, you put it in a Word file, and then you can put the Xeris information in it. you know, in very similar, same way I would write a policy. You know, I think some of our folks for purchase order generation too, you know, give you some kind of template, right? Save that time and then do that. We just had one of our head formulation scientists say, hey, I could really need some help writing IP applications. Okay, you know, let's look at it. And then our committee came up, you know, do it this way to get you like use simplest words, but to use a template for it. You know, and our marketing teams, you know, coming up with emails and messages and stuff like that. Again, do it, but let's not put any company information in for now.
Hey, Brian, a quick question for you. Is your so within the approved tools and resources, right? So tools that you have some level of confidence is going to protect confidentiality. Are you restricting what can go into those? Meaning, is there highly sensitive information that you're saying should not go into those tools? Or is basically, as long as it's an approved tool, you basically, you're basically free to do whatever you want?
Yeah, no, that's why we have the stop gates, right? So if you want to go, you get through the one gate for approval, you want to go to the other one, you need to come back to the committee. And like I said, Tim, it's the benefit of being a smaller company and dealing with this early on like that at a smaller company where, you know, we had the resources to do that and the trust to do that. But doesn't mean that something's not going to go wrong, right? You know, because we are growing. We're a rapidly growing company too. You know, and we bringing in new people and new ideas all the time. And then, you know, not even thinking about, you know, we are a virtual manufacturer, you know, what are our vendors using? And they have our data and stuff like that. So, you know, our due diligence on that side as well.
Yeah.
We're taking we're embracing AI, but we're taking a cautious approach too.
Yeah.
It's the risk because we can't afford, you know, if we have a big investigation or a big breach, you know, we don't have, you know, bunch of money to be able to litigate and do that as well. So, you know, that gets back to your risk tolerance too.
So Tim, in the industrial infrastructure business, how do you see your business clients using AI?
So as a Japanese owned company, we are a bit more traditional in our approaches to things than maybe I wish. So we're not necessarily pushing the boundaries as much as I would like. But where we are using it is things like, you know, say, you know, some of it is embedded solutions or embedded functionality within, you know, things like Salesforce, for example. We're in the process of implementing GitHub for some of our software coders. We are, you know, in the process of, you know, as I mentioned, implementing Copilot, which will be sort of a general purpose tool available to employees. And so I really sort of see a variety of different, and we're also, Brian mentioned sort of purchase orders and quotes. You know, we're starting to develop some custom solutions around specific processes. So we're working at developing a solution that would allow us to be able to generate quotes basically sort of automatically, which still have a human in the loop, right? But that way you could get a draft quote sort of almost instantly from when we get a request from a customer. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing the business do. And you know, but it's expanding on a daily basis.
Yeah. And like I picked up what you said a couple of minutes ago too, Tim, about how do you get it back down to business? Like right now, I'm heavily involved. Right now, legal's heavily involved. But how do we get it so it's integrated into the business? And I think those are some perfect examples to do it. So, you know, I don't want to have these stop gates like I talked about before. It's just, but this is the infancy of it, you know, and how we're digesting it and moving forward. But like I said, our policy could change. It could change in the next 3 months based upon that and based on some of the new technologies.
So
well, and I think just picking Brian on what you're saying, the technology is changing, and with that comes the risk profile.
Yeah.
The risk profile is changing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, which means that not only do we have to adjust our positions as the, control positions, but it also means we're constantly having to educate our employees so that they understand how the risks are changing so that they can, because they're the front line, right?
Yeah.
If they don't understand how the technology creates risk or what those risks are, there's no hope, quite frankly, of actually being able to manage this.
Yeah, and that's why I thought the survey results that Marla went over and about the training part of it was kind of alarming. It's like,
Right.
but it's also a resource constraint too, right? So, okay, we have all this stuff. All right. Oh, we need to train on it, but I'm sure everybody's going to think, well, who's going to do it? Who's the actual expert? Is it IT? Is it compliance? Is it legal? Do you have to bring in, outside help? And with it rapidly changing it, you train next month, what are you going to do the month after that? So that's what we're dealing with. It's how to digest it and to keep up with it at the same time.
What tools are you gentlemen using in your departments that you would consider to be AI? And why are you using them, and what benefit are you getting from them?
So I'll start. So look, from my perspective for legal departments, the best value opportunity for AI is respect to contract management. So we're implementing a new CLM tool, which has AI redlining built into it. And once we get that enabled, I think we'll be able to make a meaningful difference in terms of the amount of resources and time that we are spending, dealing with third-party paper or markups of our paper. The machine learning sort of or extraction technology for the repository that's been around for a while, but that actually generates a tremendous amount of value for the business. We have just implemented one of the AI-enabled legal research tools, which gives you so there are a lot of times where, folks would say, look, can I just call outside counsel because I want an answer to X? And even though we had sort of more traditional online research tools, the time and energy it takes to go find the answer just made it sort of created a strong incentive to just pick up the phone and call outside counsel. And the AI enabled legal research tools now allow you to be able to, it doesn't necessarily give you the answer in the way that you outside counsel will, but it'll be able to get you to the handful of resources that basically will give you the answer pretty darn quick. And I'm expecting we'll be able to reduce the frequency that we pick up the phone and call outside counsel. We are, brain's going, as I mentioned, we've been using Copilot, and we're really working at being able to really understand and get familiar with that technology. Look, I can be walking down the street, having a conversation and basically reviewing and responding to an email on my phone, because it just takes that little energy for us to be able to understand how to use that technology and to respond. Basic tasks in Copilot at this point require you to stop what you're doing and to struggle to figure it out. And it's going to just take time for us to get comfortable and to really understand the technology. And that's just a process that we have to go through. So that's what we've implemented now. We've kind of got an idea of what a long-term roadmap looks like, but that's what we're working with now.
Brian, what are you using?
So like the policy development right now, one of the big things I'm looking into and working on is for our auditing, monitoring, and investigations, working with IT. Part of our Microsoft suites is a Compliance 360 suite. So, how can that automate some of the monitoring and learning from it, looking at trends, analysis, and stuff like that, to free up resources for that. And that to me, that I know it sounds geeky, is exciting, because we can put it out there, we can run reports out of it, email searches as well, where it's not only looking at just word searches, but it's looking at tone, It's, it can even tell you kind of the stuff, almost the emotion that you're writing that email and things like that. So those are the things, exploring from a compliance perspective. Also compliance in the legal straddle that I do with the legal department, just like Tim was saying on the contract management, where we're using it for that as well, and the red lines for that, and that includes our healthcare professional contracts as well, and how that integrated with our fair market value calculations and stuff like that.
Do either of you use AI to take notes in meetings? I mean, as I said, I sit on several corporate boards, and some of our meetings are minuted by using an AI tool. Are you using that?
So if it's an internal meeting, we forbid it, right? Because it's company information, and once it's out there, it's out there. The notes, even when you do it to summarize your notes. So right now we forbid it. Now, if you went to a conference or something like that to do it, we would allow it, going through our process. But for any internal meetings or anything else, you should not be using those things to do it because of the confidentiality of the information.
So I agree with you, Brian, with respect to third-party tools or personally selected tools that the employees are using. Because you're right, it's confidential information, and it should not be going out there. And from a sort of e-discovery perspective, it's just a nightmare. For the teams, we're in the process of really sort of working with the IT group on what exactly is going to be our sort of policy there. And we're basically we're basically going to be, audio and visual recording, which we sort of had a policy not to, and then we kind of migrated away from that. And we're going to really kind of go back to audio visual recording is going to be turned off or disabled, except for limited circumstances. We are going to, likely enable the transcription capability within Teams. But the data will only be available for a relatively short period of time after the meeting, so that you can sort of pull out what you need from it. But that sort of the default is that if you don't actively sort of use that, pull that data out and for your own purposes, it's just going to get flushed. And because I think that there's a tremendous value of it's not about the transcript. I think transcripts, quite frankly, are a waste of data and basically don't provide a lot of value, and in fact, I think create a lot of risk. But the ability for you to be able to sort of run that transcript and then get to the end of your meeting and use Copilot to say, okay, create a summary of the meeting, a bullet point summary of the key takeaways. And to do that at the end of the meeting, where everybody kind of looks at it and says, yeah, that's the output from this meeting. And you take that and basically share it with everybody. I think that has a tremendous amount of value in terms of the efficiency and effectiveness of the overall organization. And so we really want to basically help realize that vision, and working at trying to create the right, guidepost, if you will, to manage the risk around that. And that's kind of where I think we're headed.
Yeah, I'm going to pick your brain on that one. That's great stuff, for that, because that I agree for the efficiencies there, but then that's then being the risk officer is like what keeps you up at night.
Yeah.
And how do you balance that? So yeah,
and just to be clear, there will be sort of guidelines that come with this that sort of give people understanding of what are the risks, how do you use the technology, and what meetings are you not, basically, can you not, create a transcript for, right?
Yeah.
You don't want, an executive senior leadership team meeting where you're creating transcripts, right? Yeah. You don't want your benefits administration committee where you're creating a transcript. Like and so we're going to create some hard, lines, if you will, and we'll train people on it.
So introducing AI as a tool, whether it's in your departments or in the company overall, is a huge project. And how have you managed the change management aspects required in order to implement the desired use of AI? How do you deal with the naysayers? How do you rope in the cowboys? And how are you going to do training? We've gotten several questions from our audience around training around AI and what does that look like? And are you concerned that some of the training materials themselves may have trademark and copyright infringement? And what does that mean for you if you use it? That's a very complicated question, but how the hell do you implement AI in a reasonable way in your organization or in your department?
Hey, Brian, how about I start on the change management and you work on the training? How's that?
Fair.
So, because I think we probably both have done both.
Yeah.
So the change management piece, I think that for my view of the world is that for employees to really be open to exploring and experimenting with AI, they have to, quite frankly, understand that and not believe that it is going to be a threat to their job, and have some level of understanding of what it is. And the company, so the company has to, in my view, provide a vision for what is the value creation, the value that can be created from this, and how it creates opportunities for the employees, either from just straight up sort of career perspective or ability to do things that might be more rewarding for them. And then you have to give them the education to be able to understand the technology and some basic tools to be able to start using it and experimenting with it. Because if you don't do that, it just becomes overwhelming and scary, and they're never going to do that. And so I'll sort of skip over some of the details, but we developed, I think I referenced this earlier, we developed an AI innovation program specifically targeted really at trying to start to get people to understand, to think about the opportunities and to become more familiar with it. Within legal, it started with me just talking about it incessantly and sort of getting them to start thinking about what were the possibilities. And then we started about a little over a year ago, for about 6 months or so, every 2 weeks we'd sit down and we just basically spend 30 minutes just, okay, how are you using it? What worked, what failed, sharing information as a way for them to start to get better understanding. We did a collaboration with one of the consulting houses where it was an opportunity for us to learn from them to learn from us in terms of potential use cases and experimenting with different training opportunities or modalities. And then we're sort of coming back to sort of where we were a year ago, and leveraging some of what we learned through that collaboration. And we're going to be starting when I get back from Tokyo in a couple of weeks. We're going to start again working with compliance. We're going to include compliance in this effort, sit down 30 minutes once every 2 weeks. And the first 15 minutes will be either myself or the compliance officer basically presenting a use case that basically we will share with in advance so people can experiment with it. We'll do it live in the room and sort of say, hey, here's a use case. The second 15 minutes will be somebody else from the team will be presenting a use case. And we'll basically we'll schedule these out so people have a month to prepare. But that way there is just this sort of constant drip, drip, drip of experimentation, discussion, and sharing of information. So that's how we're doing it sort of in terms of the change management piece. And Brian, I'll sort of turn it over to you to talk about sort of the training.
Yeah, I'd say one thing on the change management thing that I found interesting, here is it, rather than coming from the top down, it came from the bottom up. It's like, hey, we need this. And then just like yours, like, oh, somebody needs to help out here. So that's, change management. It's not, sometimes you think of change management is like senior executives make a decision you have to implement. Here it's like, okay, we're kind of using it already. How should we use it? And then go from that. So from a training standpoint, we took the approach, the basic training, kind of like how we initiated this call today, kind of like terminology, what's out there, the landscape. I do stuff, kind of like the risk benefit. We did the risk assessment. How does it impact us? How does it impact others? What's the risk to us? What's the risk to others? What's the benefit to us? What's the benefit? Doing all that, and then we did a departmental roadshow, right? And like I said, we're a company size where we could afford to do that. What marketing, what do you want to use it? How are you using it? How do you want to do it? Going to our research and development folks, our HR folks and stuff like that, kind of us learning as a committee, what are the needs, and then we wrote the policy, right? So it's not writing the policy, then telling everybody to fit into the policy. We wrote we kind of wrote the policy for that, and then we trained on that. And now it's the next steps and what we're doing, and we actually have a meeting about it next week. It is what's the next step about the ongoing education and stuff like that, because it is moving so rapidly, right? Because I'll bring up the Apple phone again, the Apple AI. Everybody's getting their new iPhone. What's that going to mean? Because we reimburse for devices. We don't have company-owned devices, right? So how's that going to work and stuff like that? So there's all, and I think we talked about this a couple of minutes ago, Tim. Like, what's the new risks that are coming up? And not only training. It's easy for compliance and the legal to say the sky is falling, but I think we're both taking that proactive approach. Where's the compromise? We're gonna do it. Let's just get on the same page, and how do we do it together? And I think that's been like the mantra of the training. This isn't an IT problem. This isn't a compliance problem. This is a business solution. And it's a tool. It's a tool, right? So it's like the hammer and the thumbtack. When you need the tool and when you don't need the tool.
So Brian, a question for you. We've taken the approach that our AI policy, right? There's sort of lays out the governance framework, but actually most of the risks that are associated with AI are covered in other policies. And so what we're really doing is trying to educate people on how each of those apply. And I'm curious if you're doing something similar or different.
No, very, very similar, because we have stuff in it in our employee handbook. I'm going to add stuff as we do our revision to our code, because it's updating your policies too, to have this language, right? We always say about IT resources and assets and how to use them, right? Does that include AI or not? Or you have your separate section like that. And that's exactly it. How do you, and going back to the integration into the business, it's not a standalone thing. It's too big, it's too broad, to do it. It's kind of like, we don't email, right? We don't need a policy on email like we did in 1995. How to use email, right? But we did back then, right? Marla was talking about, losing the LexisNexis and stuff like that through her research. She never had to tell a client that she used it. now the ABA is telling you, you need to tell your client you used it. So it's things are adapting and changing constantly. So yeah,
so this does kind of get back to something you mentioned at the very beginning, Tim, and that is sort of think that your outside counsel has a duty to use AI. Talk about that a little bit more. And
Sure.
how do you think that should affect your billing? And how do you think that affects the confidentiality and the protectability of the legal advice?
Yeah. So sort of two questions there. One is, look, outside counsel fees are, they just keep going up is the short answer. And, big part of my job is trying to figure out how to bring those numbers down. And, I'm looking for, I'm expecting over the next, period of time for our firms to be figuring out how to leverage the technology to reduce their billings. I'm not suggesting that it means that at the end of the day they can make less money. I'm just suggesting that they need to figure out a way to be able to do what I need them to do with less time and hopefully more effectively. And if they're not at least trying to figure that out, then they're probably, long term not going to be one of our go-to counsel. On the confidentiality piece, I think it's a really interesting question, because we all think about sort of when we get an enterprise version of ChatGPT or whatever you're using. So there's ways for them to be able to set it up so that when you query the LLM, or you have a private instance of the LLM, even you can prevent it from being able to learn, right? And so there are ways technologically to set that up so that your information does not basically inform the LLM going forward. On the in-house solutions that the law firms are developing, right? You can't just look at it as basically, hey, how do I wall off basically, making sure that basically the law firm information doesn't get to the outside world. You have to think about the fact that, our competitor may be another client of theirs, and how is our confidential information not basically making its way into and informing the advice that our competitor is getting. And I think that's going to be a really interesting challenge that they're going to have to navigate, because, by the way, there's a strong incentive if I'm a law firm, right, to say, look, we have all of this intellectual property that we've created, every brief that we've written, every client memo we've ever written, the amount of IP there is just, it's gold. And so they want to be able to figure out how to leverage that IP on a department-wide basis, a firm-wide basis. But how do you do that without basically running afoul of attorney-client privilege and confidentiality? It's, I'm going to be talking to somebody who's the innovation officer for one of the large firms in the near future. We are a client, but that's not really the impetus for the conversation. And that's one of the questions I'm going to ask is, how are they navigating that? Not because I'm asking as a client, because I'm just really interested to figure out how they're going to solve that.
So we are running out of time quickly, and there are so many questions from the audience. I'm going to try to just buzz through them quickly. A fast one to answer is, what is the name of the company that has the contracting, redlining, and management tool that you are using?
We are implementing Ironclad. There are a number of companies that have that capability. I'll stop there.
Okay. One of our listeners said that they're told that Zoom AI doesn't use customer data to train its AI. What, if any, risks would there be to use that to summarize transcripts and board meeting committee minutes?
I'm not familiar enough with it. Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with it.
Yeah, same. I think you've got to do an analysis and decide.
Yeah, and I thought one of the approaches that you're taking, Tim, at your company with the use cases and stuff like that, and really like displaying the technology, I think that's key. And I think to this question, that's key too. Is it fit for purpose? And you really got to test it out. And I think and what you said about open AI, it's like, okay, it made you do some more work, and you gotta look at that. It's not an easy button, I guess.
So going back to disclosure, one of our listeners uses Copilot for transcripts and notes, but they have a concern. I just lost where it went. They have a concern that third parties on phone calls might be using that. And what does that mean for the confidentiality of the discussion? Do you think, number one, would you ever allow Copilot or whatever algorithm you use to transcribe notes of a call with third parties? And if so, would you disclose that up front?
I would always disclose it up front if you're going to do anything like that, to see if everybody's okay. Just like you would, asking somebody if they're going to, is it okay to record the conversation? Keep it that basic, but I would say if it's any kind of meeting that we talked about before that discusses confidential information, I'd be wary of it until I tested out that tool.
Yeah. And I think that the other key part to the, look, there's a lot of questions I would have to sort of get to understand it. But the key question is it an enterprise solution or isn't it? Right? Is it something that basically where at a company level, you have basically determined that it is going to protect confidential information or not? And I think that's where I would start the analysis.
All right. So the very first question, and I know we're at time, that I do want to get to is that there's been public cases of AI generating fake citations to laws and cases and otherwise providing false data. How do we deal with this? Do we have to verify every point that comes up?
I'll give two quick answers. One is you should treat it like a first-year associate. You wouldn't take what a first-year associate gives you without checking it. So that's first. Second, the veracity of the information, of the output, whether it's completeness or accuracy, I think is actually one of the most insidious risks that we deal with on a daily basis, because we are wired to believe what we read, and our ability to be able to understand the accuracy and completeness of what the output. I think we're fooling ourselves if we think we can do that.
I totally agree. I have nothing to add to that. I mean, Tim brought that up before about the first-year associate, and that just resonated with me. It's exactly, you need to check the work. We're all responsible for it, no matter where it comes from.
Right.
You know, I like to cook. I cook a meal, I'm going to taste it before I serve it, right?
Right. Well, it's 2:02, gentlemen. Thank you so much. We may be doing this again in a couple of years because this is a moving target. And Bob, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you to our audience, and thank you again, Tim and Brian.
In a couple of years, it will be virtual robots.
Oh, okay.
No. Marla, thanks for championing this. And again, Tim and Brian, thanks for your time. And we do ask everyone to just take a minute. We have a survey at the end just to give us your feedback, as we're always trying to provide the best service for you. And obviously, if there's any assistance we can provide, whether it's recruiting talent for your team or providing some executive coaching, mentoring, advising, we'd love to be able to help you. Again, thanks for joining us today, and look forward to having you join us in the future. Thanks so much.